Hi guys, Russell here from Homebrew Republic. Welcome to another brew review. Today we're checking out a tropical IPA. It's a recipe published online by BlackRock. It's described as juicy and smooth with intense citrus and fruit aromas. The recipe has an IBU or International Bitterness rating of 35, so it should be a really nice mid-bitterness. It has a target ABV of about 5.5 to 6.5%, and it has a really low SRM in terms of colour, so we should get a really nice golden finish. The base of the recipe uses 2 of the BlackRock lager kits, but we're going to discard the yeast that comes with the kit and use a premium yeast, which I'll talk about later. To create fuel for fermentation, we're going to use 1.5 kgs of amber liquid malt extract. If you followed the recipe to the letter, you'll be using a BlackRock can, which is 1.7 kgs. We're using a Mangrove Jack's alternative, which comes in a 1.5 kg pouch. The amber liquid malt extract is going to give us a really nice richness to the colour, and normally I prefer to use liquid malt extract over something like dextrose because it gives a really nice smoothness to the body and a really nice mouthfeel in the finished product. For our yeast, we're using the SafAle US05. I've used this yeast before and it's a really nice yeast to use. There's a number of reasons I like this yeast. First of all, it creates a really subtle citrus flavour during the process of fermentation, which is going to create a nice foundation in terms of the flavour profile for us to build on later with our hops. It also has a really nice and really flexible temperature range for fermentation. The recommended range is between 12 and 25. The ideal range is between 15 and 22. So during fermentation, we'll be aiming to hold within that ideal range at about 20 degrees. For dry hopping, I've chosen to use the Moutere hop pellets. This does differ from the recipe based on what was available to me at the time. And the reason I chose Moutere is because the hop profile or the flavour profile has really distinctive tropical, grapefruit and passion fruit notes, which build really nicely into the tropical theme of the beer. In terms of process, we're going to get the brew set up. I'm going to bring the temperature down to around about 20 degrees where we're going to pitch the yeast, and we're going to aim to hold the temperature constant at that 20 degree mark right through fermentation. In terms of dry hopping, what I'm going to do is introduce 50 grams of the Moutere hops on day 3, and then I'm going to introduce the remaining 50 grams of Moutere hops on day 8. So we're using 100 grams of hops in total. For our gravity, we're going to look for a final gravity of around about 1.011 to 1.013, and we want to see gravity or the final gravity hold constant at that level for 4 days to signal the end of fermentation. Once fermentation is ended, I'm going to add liquid findings to the brew. I'm going to leave the brew for a further 24 hours, and then I'm going to cold crash the brew for a further 24 hours again. So that's 48 hours in total to prepare for bottling. The only thing left to do is get this brew on, and then I'll see you guys on the other side for a taste test. Cheers! Hey guys, welcome to my garage. I made a massive faux pas and I pitched the yeast yesterday. So yesterday I set the brew and put it in the fridge. I pitched the yeast and I completely forgot to turn the video on. So technically we are day 1. Temperature is smack on 20. It's sort of sitting in that 18 to 22 range. There's a bit of pressure coming in, hasn't fully got underway with fermentation yet, but it's doing what it's meant to, which is fine. What I actually did, which is a little bit maybe slightly different to what I said originally, I used the fridge and I brought the temperature down, and when it hit around about 24 to 26, I actually pitched my yeast there, which is the top of the ideal range, and then I let the temperature keep coming back down. And the reason I pitched the yeast at the upper end of that range was to pitch it while the temperature was a bit warmer to help activate the yeast and help get the fermentation underway. Hey guys, we are on day 3 and the temperature, probably not very clear on that, but it's holding smack on 20 degrees Celsius, which is exactly where we wanted it. We've got activity in the bubbler, not going crazy, just a nice steady fermentation. And we're going to pitch our first round of hops, which was 50 grams of Moutere. So let's get this fermenting barrel open and get these hops in. There we go, guys. Nice little level of activity happening there. All right. Got my hops. There's a couple of, you can kind of see it, a couple of big clumps in there. I'm not too worried about that. It will break up by itself. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you know that I go commando. Probably worth talking about the temperature for a second. So this is sitting in a fridge, it's not on. I do use the fridge to help temperature control. I do use a heat pad when I need to, but I don't have those on a temperature controller. I just use a timer, so I kind of work out what's needed. But the interesting thing is, so right now we're not using temperature control, and for anyone who doesn't have any temperature control, it is still possible to brew good beer without it. The one thing I would say to you is you do have to kind of understand what the ambient temperature, your standard ambient room temperature is, and then either select the beers that are suited to that temperature, or a yeast. So if we were to pick up this kit by itself, it probably would have said 18, without going back and checking the kit instructions, probably would have said hold it between 18 and 30, which is quite a broad ideal range. The yeast which we've used, which is the USO 5, has a suitable range. I think it was 12 to 25 degrees Celsius, or an ideal range of 15 to 20 or 15 to 22 or something like that. So it gives you, and you always go by the yeast you're using, but that just gives you an example of, by choosing a different yeast, how you can accommodate the ambient temperature that you're brewing in. The other thing I'd say is, if you're doing that, then especially in winter, but equally in summer, expect the temperature to sit in a range, normally of between 2 and 4 degrees, to accommodate fluctuations of temperature during the day and or overnight. And so be happy with a range rather than a specific target. But yeah, cool, guys. So that was day 3. I will come back on day 8 and chuck in the next 50 grams of hops, which was another 50 of Moutere, and then after that we'll start getting ready for bottling. Cheers. Lid's back on. The only other thing I would say is it smells amazing already, and that was before the hops even went in, so hopefully that is a good omen and a sign of things to come with the brew. Hey guys, welcome back to the garage. We are day 8. Kinda see there, we're not bubbling, but the lower water level is down here, the upper water level's there, so there's still pressure inside the fermentation vessel. So we are still fermenting, although obviously in the later stages. And as per the instructions, we are going to add our second round of hops, which was for us the last 50 grams of Moutere. I didn't actually measure them. Because I knew I was using the whole 100 gram bag, I didn't worry too much about exactly getting 50 in the first half and 50 in the second. I just roughly split them. Out of interest, I did take a gravity reading, and curiously it's actually still really high. It's 1.030, which is, to be fair, is a lot higher than I expected it to be at this point, given that we've got a target of from memory it was 1.011 to 1.015 or somewhere around there, without going back and checking. So it's got quite a long way to go for where we are from a timeline perspective. We have used 2 base kits. So potentially fermentation will be longer than normal for this brew. It's the second time I've ever used 2 kits or additional liquid malt extract. Yeah, so we'll see. Anyway guys, let's get the lid off, check out on the side and get these hops in. Alright, lid off, and when we look at that, we are very much still fermenting, so potentially that gravity will continue to come down as we're expecting it to. Our hops, in they go. As always, I'm a commando man. They will sink in and then do their thing over the rest of the brew. I don't think I mentioned the temperature before, so we have perfectly held on 20 degrees this whole time, which is great. It's exactly where we wanted it to be for the instructions. It was also spot on the ideal range for the US-05 yeast, albeit right up the top of it. So we're on day 8. In all honesty, I'm kind of expecting this to go for another week. I'm expecting us to be out at around the 14 to 16 day mark by the time we're bottling. So the plan from here, the instructions had asked for us to be holding constant at the target final gravity for 4 days, which again, from memory, without going back, it was 1.01 to 1.05. It was somewhere in that range. Might not have quite been that much. It might have been 1.013 or something. So we'll get it down there. We will hold it constant. Then what I will do is turn our fridge on and start the cold crashing process. I'll let this cold crash for 24 hours. I'll then add finings and let it cold crash or let it sit for another 24 hours, and then I will bottle. So at this point, maybe before we go, we have a quick look. Can't really, it's pretty cloudy, which is to be expected. It hasn't been cleared, but it's a really beautiful colour. Smell. I wouldn't hazard a guess at trying to describe the smell at this point or the aromas, except to say it is really nice. So, all that said, guys, the next time we catch up will be well and truly on the other side for the official taste test. Go well, catch you then. Hi guys, welcome back to the official taste test of our tropical IPA. Let's get this bottle open and check out the finished product. Bottle, glass, pour. There we have it, guys. One of the biggest features about this beer for me is the colour. So the lager kits by themselves have a really light golden colour. We've used 2 of those, which would have given some depth to the colour, and then we've used an amber malt. So I don't know how well that comes through on the screen, but what you can see there is a really nice amber tone. If we were looking at an SRM chart, it's meant to be, and I think it is, between around about a 9 and 11 on an SRM chart, and it's got a really nice clarity to it. You can see right through it. The lighting in here isn't so good, but particularly if you get the sun coming onto it or some better light, It really gives that kind of amber pop, which is really, really cool. Aromas. It's got a very, very fresh aroma to it, and to me the aroma is characterised by those tropical notes, in particular the passion fruit and the pineapple, which pretty much float right off the top. Flavour, the $1,000,000 question. It's good. The first thing for flavour for me when I think about the flavour of a beer, 70% of my assessment is it nice or not nice, or how nice is it? But the other 30% is, was it what I expected, or did I hit the brief? And what I mean by that is, for me, whenever I make a brew, I'm kind of starting from this point of, here is the goal of what I'm trying to make. Did I achieve that? The other way of looking at that is, imagine walking into a bar and you walk up to the bar and you see a line of taps. And on the front of each tap is a little label, and it's got the name, it's got the alcohol percent, and it's got this picture. And apart from trying to show you that they're unique and different, what those labels are doing is creating an expectation of what you're going to get. If you get this beer, what will the drinking experience be? Now, kind of imagine with this beer, if you walked into a bar, it'd be called a tropical IPA, it'd have 6% on the label because it's got a higher ABV to it, and then it'd have a picture, it'd be on an island, it might have a sunset, there'd be a palm tree, but there'd be a big pineapple, a passion fruit, and a grapefruit cut in half. And so you'd be getting this expectation created around this big tropical beer, and it doesn't disappoint. You could pretty much close your eyes and imagine you were drinking it on an island. So the first thing that I would say about the flavour is big and juicy. It's, if you watched one of my previous videos, which was the Juicy Session IPA, it's kind of juicy of that ilk, just really big juicy flavours, but those flavours are really characterised by the tropical notes. In particular, what we got coming through is the pineapple and the passion fruit, and then we've got some citrus back notes. So the citrus back notes are coming from two places. We've kind of got grapefruit, which was an element within the Moutere hop, but the other thing we used was the US-05 yeast, and the US-05 yeast creates some citrus tones as well, so they will have built up that citrus profile, but they're very much citrus back notes. So if you're drinking this, think tropical, that's what you're going to get. We've got the tropical notes on the front, and as we move through the flavour profile, we go into or roll into a really easygoing malt character. There's a little bit of strength to the malt character. We did use 2 base kits, but it's still pretty easygoing and very agreeable in my books. In terms of bitterness, it's a very light or a very easygoing bitterness, certainly very easy to drink in that sense. What we do have though is a lot of body in this beer. Again, because we've used quite a bit of extra malt, or an extra, I think in total we used about 4.9 kgs of malt between the 2 kits and then the liquid malt extract. So we have really built up that body. It's definitely a medium bodied beer, but what we do have is a really silky smooth mouthfeel within that body, and it's really, really nice to drink. I did mention earlier that the ABV in the beer is higher. So this was originally a recipe published by BlackRock. On their recipe, they said the target ABV was 6.5%. Now, I either forgot to measure my original gravity, or I forgot to write it down. I'm not sure which, so I don't have my exact ABV, but I suspect this will certainly be in that realm. Certainly 6 to 6.5. It's got unmistakably there's some bite from the alcohol. What I would say though is, if you are making this recipe, you're probably going to get a range between 5.5 and 6.5%, depending on what your original gravity is and depending on what your final gravity is. Remembering the final gravity was a possible range, I think, between 1.011 and 1.013. I think 5.5% is conservative. If you're making this, you'll easily be shooting for 6 to 6.5% all day long. So that said, the higher ABV and the body mean that this probably isn't a session IPA. For me, I tend to keep 3 or 4 batches of beer on the go, often at different stages of maturity, and it gives me some choice around what I grab from my garage. This one here is probably not an everyday beer for me, but what it would be is I feel like something different, an occasional or a now and then beer, which I probably drink over a series of months rather than use it as a go-to beer. It wouldn't be out of place as a festival beer. It's not out of place as like a themed beer, like if you're going to the Batch for a week and it was like your holiday beer. And it's certainly nice. Like this is the kind of beer for me I would pick up if I was only going to have 1 or 2 glasses for the night and that was it, and I wanted something a bit different and I wanted something really nice, maybe a bit stronger because of that. I'd certainly happily go to it for that reason. And to be fair, I've still been having this once or twice a week, so very nice on that front. Couple of things to call out in the brewing process. So number one, again, the original recipe that we used, I modified it in 2 ways. Number one, we used a different hop. I think the original recipe called for Nectaron, and we've used Moutere based on what was available, but they have similar flavour profiles both for tropical. The other difference was the original recipe had 140 grams of hops, and we've only used 100 grams in this recipe. So this could easily carry extra hops. If you like a little bit more hoppiness or a little bit more flavour forward character, I'd have no qualms in pushing this up to 140 or 150 grams. In the original Black Rock recipe, they used one type of hop for that whole 140 grams. I'm not sure if I was going to do it, if I'd push Moutere up. If I did, or if you did, it'd just create a really, really strong tropical flavour. If that's what you want, that's great. I think the other thing you could do if you wanted to experiment is still use 100 grams of Moutere and get that really strong sort of tropical profile going on. But remember, there's already an element of grapefruit in here, so you could look at using something like the Cascade, which has a really strong grapefruit profile, and just sort of balance that tropical out a little bit. Or you could look at something different, perhaps like Moutere, which has a very strong lime element, which will probably complement this very nicely. So there's a couple of different things you could do if you wanted to build the hops up. The other thing that I would say is that my total fermentation duration, and when I use that word total duration, I'm referring to the period, the sort of 2 to 3 days at the end where you want it to be stable. So I was out at 19 days, which is a really long, for extract brewing, in my mind, is quite a long sort of period. We did use 4.9 kgs of malt, so we've put a larger than usual level of fermentable material into our wort, and then we did only use a single yeast. So in essence, what we've done is put more fermentables in and asked the yeast to do a bigger job, which I think is the sort of primary reason why it took a bit longer. The other thing that I noticed is, particularly on the tail end, the more so than usual, the final incremental changes as it was coming down and settling were very, very sort of minor and slow. So in the Black Rock recipe, what they said was you want final gravity to be stable for 4 days before you deem fermentation to be over. I had final gravity stable for 3, not 4. But I think the reason they said that is because you can just get those very, very slow changes at the end, and it's basically to make double sure fermentation is really over. So I guess my key message is that if you do this brew, number one, be patient and expect it quite probably to take a little bit longer, especially if you stay in the recommended fermentation temperature range for the yeast. And number two, don't rush it at the end, just let it do its thing and really sort of stabilise before you move to bottling. The last and perhaps most important thing is what my friend said, and the feedback was all good. I gave it to one of my buddies. As he was sort of talking me back through the feedback, he said if you gave me a bottle of X, and he used a brand name of a common lager, and he said if you put that in my fridge, it'd sit there for 6 months because it's like drinking water. So he very much likes craft beers. He likes his different flavours, his unique flavours, and he also likes his mid-strength to strong ABV beers, anywhere from 6.5% to 8%. So he liked this. He drinks in a tasting glass, and his comment was that it grew on him. So yeah, good feedback there. Had a couple of pints with one of my neighbours over the weekend. He really liked it, passed it over to his wife to let her have a try. But yeah, commented on the flavours, commented on the taste, and one of the comments he said was good head. Does have a good strong head to it. Gave another bottle away to another neighbour. I know he hasn't had it yet, but interestingly as well, when you tell people what it is, it does sound really, really interesting. So that was kind of the reaction I got from him, was, that sounds really nice. So I think that's kind of the cool thing about it as well. But it's definitely a different beer. Might not be for everyone, but I've enjoyed it. I like making it. It's in my garage. I will be saving it. I'll be enjoying it. All that said, guys, until next time, cheers.